The stadium lights were still off when the first scream shattered the silence. No one knew where it came from, no one knew who made it, but everyone who heard it felt the same chill crawl down their spine. It was the kind of sound only desperation could produce, the kind that tells you something unforgettable is about to happen. They said the team was finished. That the season was over. That hope had already slipped through their fingers like dust. But on this cold morning, long before the cameras, the crowds, or the commentators arrived, one player walked onto the field with a look in his eyes that made even the shadows step back. He wasn't here to practice. He wasn't here to warm up. He was here to fight for something bigger than a game, something no one could see, but everyone would feel. The grass was still wet with dew as he dropped to one knee, tying his laces with slow, deliberate movements, like a warrior preparing for battle. He had been called weak. Overrated. Done. Too many injuries, too many doubts, too many moments where the world wrote him off. But today, he whispered the same words he had repeated every night before falling asleep: losing isn't an option. The locker room felt heavier than usual when the rest of the team entered. A strange energy clung to the air, electric yet invisible. They glanced at him, the man they once doubted, and for the first time, no one questioned his silence. It wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of someone who had been pushed to a cliff and refused to fall. When the coach stepped inside, holding the lineup sheet, his hands trembled slightly. Rumors had already spread. A surprise strategy, a shocking shuffle, something no one expected. Reporters were ready to tear apart the decision before the game even started. Fans were confused, critics were sharpening their knives. Yet the coach looked at his players and spoke 6 words that erased every doubt in the room: play like this is your last. As warm-ups began, the crowd slowly trickled in. Some came with hope. Most came with skepticism. Everyone came with questions. But all questions vanished when he emerged from the tunnel, the roar of the stadium shaking the metal beams. He wasn't just walking, he was marching like a man carrying the final chance of an entire city on his shoulders. His first step onto the field felt like a thunderclap. Cameras zoomed in. Fans held their breath. Opponents smirked. They thought he was broken. But they didn't know what he had survived: the late-night surgeries, the rehab days that pushed him to tears, the endless voices saying he'd never return. They didn't know the fire that had been growing inside him, waiting for this exact moment. The whistle blew, sharp and merciless, slicing the air clean in half. Instantly, the game exploded into chaos. Bodies crashed. Voices roared. Sweat flew like sparks. And through it all, he moved differently, faster, sharper, almost possessed. Every touch, every sprint, every breath seemed fueled by something beyond skill. It was purpose. Pure, unshakable purpose. The other team quickly realized they were in trouble. They had watched hours of film on him, studied every weakness, predicted every move. But the man on the field wasn't the same one from the footage. This version had a hunger the cameras had never captured. Then came the first moment that made the stadium rise. He stole the ball like a ghost slipping through a doorway, accelerating past defenders who reached for him but caught nothing but air. His eyes were locked on the goal, but at the final second, instead of shooting, he passed, a perfect, impossible pass, threading it between 2 defenders like threading a needle in a storm. The crowd erupted as his teammate scored. But he didn't celebrate. He didn't smile. He simply jogged back into position, expression hard as stone. One moment of glory wasn't enough. He was here for something bigger. Pressure increased. Opponents grew desperate. They tackled him harder, shoved him, tried to break him. But each time he fell, he rose faster than before. His teammates began to mirror his energy. You could see the shift happen, the moment doubt turned into belief. By halftime, the commentators had completely changed their tone. What began as a last chance game was turning into a resurrection. The locker room buzzed with adrenaline, but he sat alone, staring at his hands, hands that once trembled with fear, now steady with resolve. When the second half began, the clouds above the stadium darkened. Rain started to fall in thin, cold lines. The field turned slippery, unpredictable. Perfect conditions for disaster. Perfect conditions for miracles. A sudden counterattack from the opposing team sliced through the defense like a knife. The crowd gasped as the striker lined up the shot, a certain goal. But out of nowhere, he appeared, sliding across the wet grass with impossible timing, blocking the ball with a roar that echoed across the stands. But he wasn't done. He sprung to his feet, controlling the ball with a touch so delicate it seemed unreal. And then he ran, not away from danger, but straight through it. 3 defenders closed in. Rain blinded his vision. His legs burned. His lungs felt like fire. But he kept going, driven by every doubt he had ever heard. The stadium rose as one. He cut left, then right, then spun through a gap no one else saw. His jersey clung to him, soaked and heavy, but his spirit was weightless. And then, just outside the box, he stopped. Time didn't slow down, it froze. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. The defenders skid past him, unable to react. His foot connected with the ball, striking it with a mixture of pain, hope, and fury. The shot curled. It rose. It dipped. It carved a path through the storm as the goalkeeper stretched his hands desperately. But the ball kissed the inside of the post and dropped into the net. Silence. Then an explosion of noise. Fans screamed his name. Teammates sprinted towards him. Even critics watching from home fell quiet, unable to deny what they had just witnessed. But he didn't fall to his knees. He didn't tear his shirt. He simply looked up at the sky, letting the rain wash over his face, as if thanking the storms that had shaped him. The final minutes felt like hours, every second filled with tension so thick it felt physical. The opponents attacked relentlessly, desperate to force a comeback. His team held the line, fighting with everything they had. And finally, the whistle. Sharp. Final. Absolute. Victory. The stadium shook with joy. Players collapsed to the ground, laughing, crying, shouting. But he walked slowly to the center of the field, hands on his hips, chest rising and falling. His journey, his pain, his redemption, all of it had led here. Reporters rushed him. Cameras swarmed. Questions flew at him like arrows. But he said only one sentence. I told you, losing wasn't an option. The world would replay this game for years. Analysts would break down every angle, every step, every decision. Fans would tell their children they witnessed it live. Opponents would never forget the look in his eyes. But he knew the truth. This wasn't about talent or luck or fate. This was about refusing to surrender, even when surrender seemed easier. And long after the lights faded, long after the fans dispersed, long after the victory celebrations died down, one thing remained.